what looks like an old Victorian fire hydrant in the middle of a woodland. Madness. Hey guys, welcome back to Enlightened. It's your host Kev here. So today we're going to be discussing the Etruscans. Now, I've had conversations with people the last few days, trying to get a greater understanding of who the Etruscan people themselves were. I'd done a little video on my channel a while ago when I was looking at some museums in Rome. Apologies for the sound, that's the motorway right there. And on this little video that I made, we've seen these gold figurines in some kind of ceremonial position, well, ceremonial process. You've got a large figure in the centre, two serpent like heads protruding out of the base, and then an altar with a smaller person, what looks like a man, lying on the altar for sacrifice. So that's got nothing to do with what I'm going to talk about today, but that did start my interest a little bit into this whole Etruscan thing, because I didn't realise that kind of worship took place in Etruria, which is a fascinating word which we're going to come on to shortly. Now, so let's get straight to it. Etruscan people are supposed to be Trojan people, and Trojan people are supposed to come from Troy, and Troy is supposed to be over in southwestern Turkey. Yet there's people who make claim of Troy being in Cambridgeshire in Britain, and just to convolute things even more, there's actually a new Troy of Britain. What is it? Troy Novantum, I believe it was called, the new Troy, which was basically London. In the city of London area. Now, Surrey, that way. Now, it starts to get a bit tricky here, because if there was a Troy in Cambridgeshire, and you've got the giant trench, the Devil's Trench I believe it's called, which is like miles and miles long, which some believe was almost like not Normandy, like the World War I in France, when you had the massive trenches that were dug with the two armies facing off. Now, if this is the case and there was a Troy in Cambridgeshire, then how's the Troy over in Turkey? So someone put it to me that Troy of Great Britain, the original Troy in Cambridgeshire, was an older settlement. And then we were having a bit of a conversation about Homer, obviously the author of the Iliad, who talks about the Trojan War. And this person, Marshall Abrams her name was, so check out the channel, she made a claim that she thought the Trojans of Britain left a long time ago, and that there was even a settlement in Britain potentially before Noah's flood, and the ark rested on Mount Ararat, and then the subsequent expanding out from there led to the Trojans, Sumerians, whoever. Now, it just keeps getting more and more complicated, because apparently the war took place in Turkey, and then there was a migration back around 650 BCE. Now, so there's no trace of this Troy as a culture in Britain, though we've got some archaeology on the ground. There's less archaeological evidence for the Troy in Turkey, because the city itself that was excavated, forgive me, I can't think of the archaeologist's name, but he done a terrible job, and he blasted down through the centre and found all these different layers, and they believe that this was Troy and this is where the battle took place. But the sea's too far away, there's no rivers around there, there's many things like natural wells and bogs that are mentioned by Homer that aren't in the area. So some people want to rule that out as Troy over in Turkey. But yeah, we're going to have to start trying to put this together now. So you've got all these different Troys, 3 different Troys from 3 different time periods. In essence, believed to have been the same people of the same culture. So now we've got we'll go from the Turkish Trojan Wars, that's the one that's documented around 650 BCE. And what most academics and scholars, not necessarily mainstream, because there's a diffusion in mainstream archaeology itself, believe that this was the Troy, 650 BCE in southeastern Turkey. So from there you had the Trojan War. After the Trojan War, the Greeks returned to Greece, and you've got the islands of Crete, Minos, all these other different places, Odessa around the Caspian Sea. All these different places are supposed to have been where the heroes came from and the kings of the Trojan War. So you've got all the Trojans defeated, a few survivors leave, the Greeks return after sacking the city, and allegedly Trojans land on the western side of Italy, north of Sicily and that, and become the Etruscans. And there's fingerprints of them on Sardinia and all these other islands and other places around the Med. I think it gets mixed up sometimes between them and the Minoans further east in the Mediterranean, but I mean, for all I know, they could be one culture. I don't know really. As you're seeing here, it's very hard to pinpoint true history. So you've got the Etruscans that settle in Tuscany in Italy, the Roman hills of Tuscany, and south of there, allegedly a few miles, is a fishing village that grows in stature and eventually builds its own defensive wall, which becomes Rome. And then they go on, I think it's something to do with a taxation issue, was with the Etruscans or something, and a few other disputes, and eventually the Romans conquered the Etruscans. So the Romans conquered the Etruscans. This is around 550, about 550, 600 BCE. Aeneas, who was a survivor of Troy, who was a Trojan, who came to Etruria, Tuscany in Italy, and became an Etruscan. He then, the dog's running away. He then becomes Romanized. Obviously the Romans and the Etruscans both came from the Trojan War, allegedly survivors of the Trojan War. So they share the common ancestry. Now, from there, Brutus, who I believe he's a he's a relation of Aeneas, and it was prophesied that he would kill his parents or his father, I believe it might have been both of them, and this came to pass. So he was then removed from Rome, asked to leave Rome, evicted, au revoir, he was told to go. So he left, and apparently upon leaving the Etruscan area of Tuscany or Rome, wherever it was, he travels round, he picks up settlements along the Mediterranean, first going east towards the Levant, picks up people there, and then swings round and starts coming along the African coastline and the Mediterranean coastline. I hope you're sticking with me here. Now he swings round into modern day Brittany, which has got an interesting association with Britain from this encounter all the way up to the Plantagenets. They were British kings who ruled, English British kings ruled for 300 years, their family tree, and they're the ones who lost the grip on Brittany. There was only a small part of Brittany left. So yeah, that was gone. But the Brutus allegedly landed here around 500, just over 500 BC, around that time, and had engagements with French kings. So there was a culture already in France, modern day France, who Brutus then engaged with and had conflicts with. And don't forget, this is at the very start of the Roman Empire. We're going over 2,000 years, 2,500 years, if that's to be believed. It sounds so confusing, I know. And he has conflicts with these French kings who do not like Brutus, do not have an appreciation for him, his kinsfolk. They have a conflict. Brutus has to leave. He loses several hundred of his men, and he's like, we've got to get out of here. So he goes to the island of Britain. Now, this is where we've got to pause another moment. Brutus allegedly went to a temple of Diana and was given a premonition or a vision, and it was told to go to Britain, that it was uninhabited and there was only giants in Britain at the time. You know, the whole Gog Magogs and all that kind of stuff. Well, the funny thing about that is that there was allegedly a migration to Britain 1,000 years before that from Albine. And I've done a video on my channel about the mythology of Albine and his 30 daughters who travelled to Britain, and this is allegedly how the giants were conceived and all this kind of stuff. But that's all like mythological in essence. So you've got this migration to Britain 1,000 years before. You've got an old Troy that potentially existed, but there's no trace of the culture who built it, lived there, whatever. And then you've got Brutus coming over 1,000 years after, basically not having to have any conflicts in Britain, taking land in Britain. And then obviously that was the start of the kingship of Britain, really. As your Wilsons and Blackett's have pointed out, unless you could prove that you were descended from Brutus, you would not be given the right of kingship. You had to establish that line. So Brutus was basically walked in and started this whole Britain thing, got it all going. So yeah, so Brutus has got this whole thing going in Britain. He's got the British kingship started. The Etruscan civilization collapses in Italy. The Roman Empire becomes established, apparently, as the dominant force of the Mediterranean. So where were all these other places that Brutus stopped off at on his journey when he left Italy? Were these places, well, they were his kinsfolk. That's why he went there. He went there to collect these people as his kinsfolk. Now, is it possible that these people, in the 150 years that they'd lived there since the fall of Troy, is it possible that these people had built cities, established cultures, or were these all the remnants of an Etruscan civilization, towns, villages that were already owned by their kins, like the Trojan people, the Trojan stock? So did these populations then expand out at the same time? Because you're starting to see where I'm struggling to grasp this now. There's supposed to be a migration from Britain out east, and then yet we're told that there was a migration east back west, but there's no one in the west. And to be honest, I'm struggling to get my head around it, and I've probably waffled on long enough, and there's a lot more I could talk about on this topic, but like I say, it becomes a bit of a guess who. So much information that is unstable and unreliable, really. And I can't find my dog, so I'm gonna have to go and get him. But yeah, thanks for stopping by, guys. I'm sorry to bore you there. I won't just share this, I'll try and put the visuals into this video as well, so you can actually get a better understanding of what it is I'm trying to communicate here. And I was just pretty much speaking my mind in this video, more of a get something off my chest kind of thing. But yeah, sorry about that. I had to bolt then, couldn't find my dog. Spent 10 minutes running through the woods looking for him, and the net and apple. But yeah, I realised when I was eating the apple there was a couple of things I'd missed out when I was talking there. Number one being, when we were talking about this Troy of Britain, and a lot of people agree that the nice little river here. A lot of people agreed that the battle took place over in Turkey, even though the city of Troy doesn't actually match the descriptions described by Homer, who again some people believe was multiple people or a fake name attributed to a certain group of work that was, you know, all bundled together, which happens quite a lot from what I'm starting to understand. And yeah, so Homer's described a different kind of land, different dimensions to what the Troy is in Turkey, and some people agree that it matches up more with the one in Cambridgeshire. Now, this is where again it gets so tricky. If Brutus did have conflicts with people in France, Brittany, before he landed in Britain, then these people who we engage with, they were already in situ, must have been there for a long time. And also the part of France, it's believed that Agamemnon, the great king of the Greeks, who managed to pull this army together to help his brother, Menelaus, is it? The one who fights Paris and all this kind of stuff. Which in the Iliad, you know, you talk about mythology, Homer then describes Paris being transported from the battlefield by the goddess Venus in a cloud of smoke back to his bedroom, in essence. So there's a lot of mythology going on in the Iliad itself, and it's hard to extrapolate the true facts, but the geography is the one that you can't really change too much, because the land is the land, you know, regardless of opinion. But so you've got Homer describing a description of the Trojan battle doesn't fit Turkey, but you've got no reference to a battle taking place in Britain. You've got no culture left behind from this ancient Troy. So again, this conversation was about the Etruscans. So I had to go through that, so you know the Etruscans came from allegedly Turkey, but also apparently, potentially, they came from Britain, went out to Turkey and came back. And you'd be like, well, how is this possible? Well, you'd have something called the Cymric language, you know, ancient British, ancient Welsh, but still alive in Wales. Now, this language is traceable. Now, Alan Wilson went to the places, the geography that Brutus was meant to have stopped off at on his way to Britain. So Alan Wilson went and he found the language, the structure, it's the same. It's a clear indication that there was these peoples there, or at least the people who were there were able to communicate with one another. So then you move from there, you've got this language found in commonplace, but that was all around the Mediterranean. So what about the stones that you find around Scandinavia and places like that, Northern Europe? This is supposed to have been of the Scythian migration as they came Northern Europe and established themselves in places like Sweden, Norway, you know, the Nordic states, and eventually arrived in Scotland as the Picts. So you've got this northern migration, and then you've got this Mediterranean migration. This is all west to east now, by the way, under the assumption of Troy being in Turkey. So how is it that a few days ago I was able to find, a couple of days ago, there was discoveries made in Bulgaria and Romania of alleged tablets, these golden tablets which I'll be honest, I'm not too sure if that's a legit discovery and the information on the tablets is legit. There's not much information I can find. The information I did manage to receive was off a person who was Russian, and she managed to send me a link to a Russian website, which I translated and put it onto Britain's Hidden History. I might have put it in the on my posts on this YouTube channel as well, actually. Now, so you've got Romanian and Bulgarian Etruscan discoveries. One of them was a little gold book known as the Orphic book, which is a little gold book, solid gold by the way, and it's apparently the oldest known book in the world, some 2,500 years old, which happens to fit right into the time frame. So this is the time period when Brutus left Rome, 500 BC. So how is it that you've got the Etruscans who have only been in Italy, Tuscany, for 100 or so years, 150 years? Perhaps they had an older kinsfolk there already, which is why the Trojans were able to migrate there after the war. But how is it that up over northeast around the Caspian area, is it that we find Etruscan artifacts? And there's a huge burial that was found on the Varna necropolis in Bulgaria, and you want to see it, like there's some of the gold and the wealth that was found in this burial site. I think it was like 400 graves and like 45 that were like warrior graves, and this one that was like a king. So my mind straight away there, I'm thinking, where's that gold come from? Where's this? Because there's not much talk of this big culture around there. So who are these people? Are they part of some kind of other connected larger society, if you will? Because if you've got the Etruscans all along the Mediterranean, and as I said earlier, you've got the Minoans over here by Greece and the Aegean in that area, and the Minoans, alright, let's leave the Minoans out of it, because the Minoans say they're separate, but let's just stick to the known Etruscans you've got along the Mediterranean, places where Brutus stopped, which is in the area of the Minoans anyway. And then you've got Etruscans in northern Europe, northeastern Europe, and then Brutus goes and founds Britain, all in 150 years. Now, I don't know much about the archaeology of Eastern Europe, I really don't, but there was either an explosion of the Trojans leaving Troy and the area of Troy and Turkey, and they flooded certain areas. This person, he might have been a warrior that was part of the conflict, and he's got a load of plunder, and that's where his burial was, that's where his people were, and that's where he's buried. Or it could have been like, this could have been someone escaping Troy who already had loads of money, or it could have been another one of these outer regions that was attached to the Trojan Empire civilization, if you will. Hence why the Etruscan writing and the Etruscan artifacts. But yeah, I'm going to leave it there this time, because Taz is looking at me. It's time to go home, and I've stopped near traffic, so I hope you're able to hear that. And like I said, I will put visuals in, and I'll put a few links to people who've got the further down the line with this knowledge than I am. I've only been studying, well, the Etruscans for a week or two really. It's just something that got me interested. Like I say, I've done that video, like I say at the start of the video, I've done that small video on these gold figurines, and I just didn't know it was going to expand out into all this. Was the Etruscan civilization this massive empire? And when I say massive, we're talking about from Spain and northern Africa to northeastern Europe, the Caspian Sea area. You know, this is a lot. And don't forget, in the middle, if you draw the line across the middle and follow the sea path, you've got dots. You've got Tuscany, Sardinia, Italy, and then you go along the Mediterranean, you've got the southeastern Turkey connection, Carthage, you know, all these other places that that Brutus stopped off at. So I'm unsure what the point of this video is. I haven't really got a point really. It was more me just speaking my mind and pointing out the few contradictions and the difficulty in trying to put all this together. But yeah, alas, it's time to go. The sun's come out, so I'm going to enjoy the moment. Catch you in the next video. Peace.
Hey guys, I had a couple of things that I didn't mention on my walkabout with Taz before, who has heard me talking and started to get rattled as always. And while I was out and about with Taz, I was on my walk back, I was contemplating a little bit further about this whole Etruscan thing. Now, I do remember coming across Marshall's interview on Britain's Hidden History regarding Iman Wilkins's work in relation to Wilson and Blacker, and she makes the nuts and bolts of it is that she thinks there was 2 wars. Now, obviously I've made reference to the Albans and the 30 Sisters or whatever when they came to Britain and stuff like this. Well, it's taken that migration happened as fact, yet there's a lot of, as I say, mythological elements that run through it as well, as there is with a lot of these tales when you go that far back, to be fair. But she believes that the Gog Magog Hill around that area of East Anglia is where, northern Cambridgeshire is where the city of Troy was. Now, there's a lot of other areas that got, a lot of other cities that got toppled, if you will. Because this is the thing, you know, Troy was not standalone in these battles. And she believes, obviously, there was 2 separate battles, the Troy in the west and the Troy in the east. And that the Troy in Britain was more of a conquest, if you will, and the city was destroyed, and the people who was Albine and her followers, her sisters and all the rest of them, apparently they moved down to London, and I think she said founded London around about 1100 BC, something like that. So she believes that was the date for the first Trojan War, which is 1100 BC, which I can see how she's derived there, and it makes sense. But I still can't get my head around the fact that if an invading force around 1100 BC conquered Troy, that was occupied by people of a migration 400 years earlier, a few hundred years earlier, 400-500 years, then this was a big culture, 400-500 years sitting in England, developing, growing. And then you had this battle where, this is what's confusing me, because Marshall, and she's quite open in saying that, you know, this isn't factual, this is her interpretation of events, just everyone's got their own interpretations and trying to put pieces together. But yeah, if Agamemnon, like Iman Wilkins and that believes, was in France and you had these other states around there, then why is Agamemnon mentioned in the Iliad? So is the Iliad a condensation of the 2 Trojan Wars? Because there is references in the Iliad itself of, as I said in that video before when I was walking the dog, you know, you've got the bogs, PT ground, the great crops of Troy. Apparently Troy had many fields full of crops, and that was one of their biggest assets really. They traded in crops with other places in Europe, I'm surmising, and that's where they generated such wealth, not to mention the mineral wealth of England and Scotland and Wales and all that. If this is the thing, if this Albine migration came over, did they lie in situ in East Anglia and northern Cambridgeshire, or did they spread out because, as I say, there was other conflicts of the Trojan War that took place, where other cities were destroyed that were not just Troy. Sorry, my phone's down to like 5% battery. So there's a lot to discuss there, and unfortunately my phone's about to die, so I'm gonna have to come back to this topic later.
I give it up to you, I do